terrific. Now, I've been talking and writing about nuclear energy for years now, like you have, Graham, and I've said all along that the first thing that should happen, and I don't think really there's any argument against it, is to lift the ban on nuclear energy. Because it doesn't mean that the government has to build it, doesn't mean that anyone has to build it, but it at least means that it exists as a legal option. I mean, you can hardly expect an Origin or an AGL or any other investor to seriously look at a form of power that's illegal, and as we know, we had on Friday the opposition lay out their details of their big plan. But the PM was asked yesterday about lifting the moratorium, and this is what he had to say.
No one is going to. They couldn't even get the Queensland LNP to drop their moratorium because it makes no sense. There's a moratorium in his own state. There's a moratorium in New South Wales, across federally. And you know who introduced the moratorium on nuclear energy? Here's a question for the media. See if you can guess. I'll give you a clue. He was Prime Minister for a long time. John Howard introduced the moratorium on nuclear energy.
Now, yes, Howard introduced the moratorium. He did a deal with Victoria to take it national. That's how we ended up with all of that. But how can he seriously argue against lifting the moratorium? You can say, oh, well, the states aren't on board. Who cares whether the states are not on board or not? Just lift the moratorium and let the market decide. Unless, of course, you are in some way scared that if you lift the moratorium, it might actually work and then you'll look like a fool.
Well, it's certainly an extraordinary thing, isn't it, to think that technology that's used widely around the world remains banned even from consideration in Australia. There's no harm in having a look, you would suggest, but that's completely off the table. Now, we have to also look at a bit of history here. John Howard did the deal to allow a refreshing of the existing nuclear reactor in Sydney for medical purposes. And since that time, the issue of climate change has changed the debate dramatically. There wasn't talk about decarbonising energy systems when those decisions were taken. And it's always good policy that if the facts change, you're right to change your mind. And we're seeing a dogged determination from stopping that happening. And you certainly have to ask why.
You certainly do. And I mean, when we talk about energy, sometimes I feel like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. I'm sure you feel the same, Graham. I mean, how many times have we had the energy market operator tell us, we need more gas? We've done nothing about that. But I couldn't believe this one from Zali Steggall, Teal MP, of course. She says that baseload power is an antiquated notion. Take a look.
This idea that we need this baseload is an antiquated idea as well. Our grid is evolving and changing. We are now, with smart technology and appliances, able to meet the needs of the grid by turning on and off as required on demand.
Oh, honestly, that's it. I'm done. I mean, how can someone who is charged with making laws about this stuff actually sit there and say that baseload power is an antiquated notion? I mean, is she suggesting that we must only use power when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, etc.? Or is she suggesting that we should all have batteries on the side of our houses? Which is great if you live in one of the teal electorates and have the money to do it, but it's not much good to everyone else.
Well, I think in this case, Caleb, she's talking her book. She's putting the view of people who sell the batteries and the panels and the other stuff and profit quite well out of the chaos that is the existing energy market. It's a bit of a semantic word game over this issue of base load. What we're really talking about is having a proportion of energy in the system that you can rely upon when the intermittent sources aren't working. Call it whatever you like. It's a sort of given, proven fact everywhere in the world you're going to need hydro, coal, gas or something that is there. And this notion that you can simply turn everyone off when there's not enough, that's no way to run a first world country.
It's just ridiculous. Quickly before we go, Graham, Victoria, of course, we know wants to get rid of gas, which I mentioned before, from households, can't use gas, cooktop, etc. But Redbridge has done a poll out today, found that only 14% of respondents were more likely to vote for the government because of it. And nearly half, 48%, said it would make them less likely to vote for the government. I mean, people are voting with their feet here. They still want gas. Even the federal government acknowledges that gas is important to the grid. Why can't Victoria, the wokest state in the country, see it?
Well, this is the big learning from the energy transition, that people don't like to be told what to do and they don't like to be forced to pay for it. So it's all very well to hold views about things, but the rubber really hits the hits the road when it impacts on your personal space. And that's what we're seeing here. So ultimately, there's an authoritarian bent to the climate crusade to restrict people's flying, use of travel, use of gas and other things. And there's only so much that people will tolerate. No surprise at all that it's Victoria at the leading edge of trying to introduce these compulsions.